Okay, let's start it, yeah. Okay, good evening, everyone. It is 6:31 on Tuesday, September 23rd, and we will begin the NREC meeting. So let's see here. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll begin with some general public comments. So, would you like to do?
Apologies.
I'm-
Attendance.
Attendance, yes.
Attendance
Let's
first.
have a roll call, please.
Thank you. I will now begin a roll call for September 23rd, 2025 NREC meeting. Commissioner de Villeborg,
Here.
Commissioner Law,
Here.
Commissioner Noe,
Present.
Commissioner Rayevsky,
Present.
Commissioner Yee.
Present.
Thank you, Commissioners. We have a quorum.
Okay, let's move on to the general public comment. So in an effort to better manage the business on the agenda, general public comment will be limited to 30 minutes at the beginning of the agenda. I think we can have that covered here. So we'll take comment cards here, or you can raise your hand on Zoom.
Thank you, Commissioner. If there are any participants on Zoom who would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand. Thank you. We do have one in-person public comment. Will Jeff Leon please join us at the podium?
Should be a little light on the podium. Yeah.
My comment today is regarding the proposed tree amendment. The amendment has 4 points that concern me. The first is dropping protection for non-natives over 12 inches. The amendment allows the vast majority of our trees, which are non-natives, to be cut down. Only a small percentage of our trees will be protected. This is a small list of native trees. The vast majority of our trees can be cut down without a permit, foregoing the notification appeal process. Our non-natives are no longer protected, so notices won't go up and the community will have no input on its environment. This also drops the required replacement for our non-native trees since they're no longer protected. The end result is less trees. This is guaranteed. The next point is on-site replacements. Currently, the language is loose regarding having to plant on-site. The amendment closes this loophole and gives a clear, straight path to off-site planting. This is where it would help to reference Pasadena's requirements. Pasadena requires that 50% of the replacements be on-site. With a large amount of developments coming to South Pasadena's future, this is critical. Next point is Public Works doesn't need a permit. The amendment allows Public Works to decide what tree can be removed without notifying the public. Since they don't have to pull a permit, any tree can be taken down at their discretion. There's no transparency. The last point is the notification and appeal process. The amendment allows notifications only if Public Works denies the permit application. And now permits only apply to a small list of native trees. The majority of our trees will no longer have protection or the notification process. If Public Works decides to remove a tree, you won't have a voice to protect it. This gives all the power to Public Works, and they make mistakes. My personal story is with a jacaranda tree on Marengo and Maple. There was a notice saying a jacaranda tree was in declining health. I stepped back and I noticed it had foliage just like all the other trees around it, except the tree next to it was clearly dead. Someone in Public Works put the notice on the wrong tree. I called in numerous times to tell them to correct the mistake, and I received no response back. The notice was eventually taken down, and it took some time for that dead tree to be taken down. But a mistake like this takes decades to correct. We cannot be giving all the power to Public Works to do this. If this amendment is due to honest and serious requests for removals based off of hazardous conditions, then we shouldn't be gutting protections. We should fix the process and set a fast track for those scenarios. There's no reason why South Pasadena cannot be a role model for managing its canopy. I find it very troubling that these 4 points were approved without a forestry plan. I understand it's in the budget, but we need to take care of this now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Okay, are there any other public comments on Zoom?
No, there is no more public comments. That now closes our general public comment period.
Okay, yeah, we'll close the general public comments and move on to item number 2 on the agenda, the fire hazard severity zone map.
Good evening, Commissioners. Greg Lloyd, Fire Chief. Pleasure to meet with you this evening and just kind of share with you what we've gone through in the process in developing the fire hazard severity zone maps here for the city of South Pasadena. So basically, to give you a brief history on the fire hazard severity zones, they were brought forth as a result of a number of pretty destructive fires that happened, the first one being the Panorama Fire in 1980 in San Bernardino County. And then after that is when the state fire marshal decided to designate fire hazard severity zones within state responsibility areas. So there's something that I'll share with you. There's 3 types of responsibility areas. There's state responsibility, federal responsibility, and local responsibility. We know them as FRA, SRA, and LRA. So we're about just close to the military with the amount of acronyms that we have. So they started to designate it within state responsibility areas. We in South Pasadena would be known as a local responsibility area. In 1991, the Tunnel Fire took place. Most people don't know it as the Tunnel Fire. They know it as the Oakland Hills Fire. This fire only destroyed about 1,200 acres, but it destroyed about 1,500 homes. It was the most destructive fire to date, and one that the area that very much resembles our Monterey Hills. I've spent about 27 years within the fire service, worked both on the ground and in the air within our air operations program within San Diego City, and can tell you that when I first got here and toured the Monterey Hills, it looked a whole lot like the Oakland Hills. Narrow streets, steep terrain, closely dense houses. So as a result of that fire hazard severity zones got extended to the local responsibility area. In 2021, the governor signed into law SB 63, which required all 3 zones to be published in the maps. Those, the wrong way, sorry. The government codes that cover this, Government Code 4202, which talks about the fuel loading, the slope, the fire weather, and other relevant factors that help determine the zones. And then Government Code 51178, which talks about the mapping of those areas, both the high, very high, and the moderate in those as well. Something to be noted, we've done a couple of community meetings as well as some public outreach, either with direct handing out of flyers, attending community meetings, as well as social media outreach. And one of the big concerns is about the insurance impact of these maps. It's really important to note that these are called hazard maps and they're not risk maps. Risk maps are what the insurance companies use. A hazard map basically looks at the terrain, as it says here, that the physical conditions that create the likelihood for fire behavior over a 30 to 50 year period without considering mitigation measures such as home hardening, fuel reduction, or recent wildfire. Risk, which is what the insurance companies use, look at potential damage can do under existing conditions, taking into account mitigation efforts. We look at this as more of an educational piece, is to help inform the public of, hey, these are some of the hazards that are within the area versus the risk which the insurance companies use. So when the map came out, we had some concerns, and I'll forward to it real quick. So the map came out, was released in March of 2025. It looked like this. This was a concern for us because if you notice and you're familiar with the city, the Monterey Hills within the southwest portion are largely untouched and not identified within the map. And so we had a couple of meetings with the state fire marshal's office and came up and determined their methodology. So their methodology first started with is to create the inputs that they use for their formula. And in order to do that, they had to divide the land between wildland and non-wildland areas. In order to be considered a wildland area, you had to have 200 acres of contiguous fuels. We don't have that within the city of South Pasadena. And so as a result, we fell into the non-wildland area, which meant that's urban areas, agricultural, barren land, and bodies of water. When you fall into that category, you don't get put through the formula. You actually get submitted, submitted to an Embercast map. And they looked at Embercast potential based on wind direction and the proximity to the adjoining wildland area, which would be the arroyo. That would be the largest contiguous fuel bed that was close by. And so as a result of that, we got this map. And so this map's an Embercast map, and then it makes sense. It's not accurate, and it makes sense. We had that discussion with the state, and that they said, well, that's why within Government Code 51-179, you have the ability to alter it. And so what was the methodology that we used in altering it is we used that the existing South Pasadena Municipal Code. The existing South Pasadena Municipal Code in section 14.1, codified in 2022, said that the area west of Meridian and south of Monterey to the city limits would be considered a high fire hazard severity zone. And so we took that into consideration with that. Here are our concerns. There are about 660 acres total within the Monterey Hills, and 122 of that are fuel beds that are within that. So they don't meet the 200 criteria, but they're certainly enough to cause damage and ignite homes, especially if they're not protected. And so those are the elements that we wanted to educate the public on. What are the impacts of the fire hazard severity zones? So in the very high, which is the most severe, and if we go back to this map, it's the red. So that would be considered the very high. The orange is the high, and the yellow is the moderate. And so the impact, legally, it has to be adopted by ordinance. We've finished the first reading September 17th, and we're going to second reading and adoption October 1st. So we will be compliant with that law. And then the other part of it is that the construction, all new construction has to comply with the Building Code 7A, Chapter 7A out of the Building Code, which talks about fire-resistant construction, boxed eaves, fire-safe roofs, and things of that nature. The additional part of this, and we'll talk a little bit more about AB 3074, this is a defensible space clearance zone from 0 to 30 feet. It includes a zero zone of 0 to 5 feet, which basically means that the intent is to not have any combustible vegetation within 0 to 5 feet of your structure. They're subject to annual defensible space inspections, which we are already currently doing. A real estate disclosure, which just means that when you sell your property, you have to disclose that it's in a very high fire hazard severity zone. And then as well as a subdivision map disclosure and a safety element update. And once we get into the adoption phase, we will then update our safety element to reflect that as well. In the high fire hazard severity zone, same thing, adopt by ordinance. And then the construction, as of January 1st, 2026, new construction falls within Chapter 7A of the California Building Code. And then defensible space clearance is similar to the previous, but there is no zero zone. So it's just 100 foot. What we like to say, lean, green, and clean is the way that I had to describe it when you want to see what we're looking for in the defensible space from a fire hazard perspective. So AB 3074, this is a very interesting law. It was signed into law over 2 years ago. It still has not been put into effect. And that could give you a little bit of clue as to why. They are planning for it to go into effect January 1st of 2026. They are still trying to determine what exactly is acceptable within the zero zone. Are potted plants acceptable within the zero zone? Is a large, mature, fire-resistant tree acceptable within the zone? And those conversations are still taking place, but they still want it to go into effect in January 26. It has been delayed at least twice because there is a lot of robust discussion regarding this. Why is there? If you look at that bottom, new construction compliance is January 1st of 2026, and existing property compliance is January 21st of 2029. Which means that all existing properties within the very high fire hazard severity zone have to come into compliance. The details are still under development. I had somebody ask a question and be like, well, what are we going to do come 2026 if that comes into effect? And I said, well, we're going to work with you for 3 years to figure out what that's going to look like, because you have until 2029. So as a result of that, we had a study session with council, talked about the options, provided the options of taking it. We were at the very minimum required to adopt the state's map by law. They came and they said, you can change the map, you can adjust it, but you can only adjust it up. You cannot adjust it down. You cannot make something less severe than what we have already determined it to be. So we felt that, and we presented to council, and council agreed that this was the best option, which was to take our existing map and their existing map and lay them together. So it doesn't necessarily add any new high or very high fire hazard severity zones. It just basically takes what we already had. And then the only other part that looks a little odd is the yellow zone. The yellow zone is the moderate. It's a buffer zone that was merely just meant to, they just put as an addition to any adjacent high. We really didn't feel it was necessary within that because we get really into the urban areas once we get past Monterey and Meridian. And so we just did not include those areas if they were eclipsed by already the high fire hazard severity zone. So we talked about the impacts of these as well. And then the education for that. And in addition to that, you should have a handout or that was provided. One of the things that we received feedback on as a result of our community meetings was, help us understand what right looks like. And so she's putting that up. And so what we've started to do, and really in another aspect, is to start formalizing a lot of our processes. And so developing, and these are still in draft form, and whether they're going to be called standards or administrative regulations, but there are things that we're going to be putting out that will tell you how to do something right. So it's an educational piece that comes out, and if you go through and you start to look at there, so there's your defensible space zones. So the one on the top, it would be something considered within the high. So if you notice, there's only a zone 1 and 2. That's the lean, green, and clean model. And then the one below it includes the zone 0. So if you see within the zone 0, they've got no vegetation. It's hardscape. They don't want wood chips or anything combustible within that close proximity. And so within that, like I said, that's still under debate. We start talking about tree spacing based on slope to help with fire hazard severity within that, so that we can see that to help limit the promulgation of fire. The other parts that we've looked at and we've added in, if you want to continue on, Danielle, was the we looked at, so ladder fuel, so limbing up trees to 6 feet off, so that fire is very much a natural phenomenon within the wildland area. And if fire burns, it burns off the duff, it burns off the leaf litter, it creates nutrients and helps the trees grow. But if those trees aren't limbed up, then that fire gets into the canopy and then destroys the tree, and that's what we're wanting to avoid. We also have a cross-reference table for protected trees versus non-protected trees, and what they, and then also educating folks on the hazards. There's certain trees that are non-native that are very susceptible to fire, and so we just want to educate our folks on that. And if you go through, keep moving forward, so there's some of them. So we have the coast live oaks that are the protected. There's the eucalyptus, the palm trees, which definitely are those of a high hazard. And they're not, not necessarily protected. But again, it's what we're looking at this from is not necessarily just a removal of a non-protected tree in general. We're looking at this from a fire hazard perspective. We're looking at it. Is there a hazard that's going to be presented, within the defensible space, so that if somebody is looking at something from a defensible space perspective. And if you keep moving one more, so yeah, so the cypress trees, the Italian cypress trees are one that's that can be, oh, you're fine. Yeah, you're good. Yeah. In that as well. And then past that, here are all the references. This is where we pulled all of our information from. It comes from the state website. It comes from other counties that have done a lot of work. And then there's also helpful links in there that just provide a lot more information for those people that want to continue to move further on to really get into a deep dive on those different things. And so we did a study session, we did some community outreach, talked to folks in the public, and then also did 2 community meetings. We had one at Monterey Hills Elementary, one at Arroyo Vista Elementary, and had some great feedback, great communication, great discussion with the public. And then we're going for second reading in the 1st of October, first meeting in October. And with that, I am open to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
So we'll have any questions from the commission?
I've got a couple. So you mentioned the 3 responsibility areas, federal, local,
Yes.
and state. Is South Pasadena all considered a local one, or do we have pockets of federal and state as well?
All LRA.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, so, because and even if you expand beyond that, if you go to the county of Los Angeles is still considered local responsibility. Now, there are pockets within the county that they'll sign an agreement with for direct protection agreements with CAL FIRE or with that. But yeah, there are no state responsibility areas within the city.
Okay. And so when we talk about these defensible spaces, it tends to be around like a home. I'm
Right.
curious, how do these fire severity hazard maps impact something like the Arroyo Seco Nature Park, which is very densely treed, but like doesn't
Right.
have any homes or anything that you would need to defend structure-wise, or
Right.
not that many things to defend
Yeah.
structure-wise.
So really, for something this is all about structure defense. So the defensible space really talks about in proximity to a structure, as you had mentioned. So there really isn't anything that would go beyond best forest management practices
Okay.
to be able to address just those areas in general.
Okay, so this won't force us to like limb up all the trees all over Monterey Hills and like space things out in the wilder areas.
Right.
Then-
Other than looking at that, and the only reason I preface that, we've put in for a $500,000 HMGP hazardous mitigation grant to really address all of the city-owned properties and looking at that to making them healthy and doing that. So for us, there's so much city property in that area, Elephant Hill, right over by that we currently clear a 200-foot space, fuel break between the structures or the property and the city property. If we're successful in getting this grant, this gives us the opportunity to go through and do a major cleanup to, make sure that the trees are, healthy, protected, and all of that. So if limbing them up is going to be what's in the best interest for that tree, then sure. But I think all to be done within, really looking at what, if it's not in that defensible space, is there something that we can do to make that, open space, more healthy?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Leon's comment about us having an urban forestry management plan before we start to do something broad scale like that. But it's nice to hear that this doesn't directly impact this, except for the grant that we're submitting.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all I've got.
Chief Lloyd, great presentation. I had a
Thank you.
few questions as well. So seeing as we have presumably a three-year window here to start getting things done for the existing, at least coming up on 4, I see this being a very expensive proposition for both the city and for homeowners. And then I think the real rub's going to be, given our cities about 50-50 renters versus owners, that's going to be another major hurdle to try and address. Are there other cities that have already gone ahead and implemented guidance from the state and/or regional level that have laid out blueprints for how the city can pursue this? Because I can't see this being a strictly public venture. It says somewhat has to be involved public-private or some other combination.
Absolutely. And so because the exact details of AB 3074 have not been ironed out yet, it's hard for anybody to move forward with the zero zone. There are certain areas, mostly within true wildland urban interfaces, that have adopted the zero zone just in and of itself for any new construction. And there are those areas that you're talking about, like up in the Sierras, that are true. They border up onto the wildland urban interface. They border up onto the forest. And so they've made those decisions just kind of as a general. I know that what LA County has done is created something very similar to this, which is an ornamental vegetation plan that help people, like, here's how you design your, here's how you can design your yard or your landscaping so that you're using fire-resistant trees or trees that are less likely to burn, bushes, shrubs. How high do you want them to be? What close proximity? Those best practices are all we've seen kind of in place right now at this point. And everybody is kind of waiting because there is so much robust discussion over this, because as you are recognizing, everybody is recognizing this is a pretty severe impact. You have people that have spent tens of thousands of dollars on their landscaping that could invariably be asked to tear it all out. And there's unfortunately no, there's no, there's no pathway for funding for that. There's just the mandate. And so we're all anxiously watching to see what is going to take place. And thankfully that, we'll have 3 years to work through that piece. And we'll anxiously watch for things like homeowner assistance programs or something like that because of the financial impact that it could be. You're welcome.
Comments? Sure.
So you mentioned like a defensible space assessment. Is that so that's a requirement later on, like annual defensible space inspections. Does SPFD do those now? Is that like, is a homeowner that's concerned able to say like, hey, I'm in Monterey Hills, I'm concerned that I'm not compliant, or I'm doing some landscaping. Can I get like a check to make sure I'm doing something right, or I don't have any glaring errors to fix?
So yes to both. And in fact, I probably got I have an inspection scheduled next Monday as a result of one of the meetings. We do defensible space inspections annually right now, ever since that we've designated in 2022 the Monterey Hills as the high fire hazard severity zone. So we're already doing those defensible space inspections. It's part of our staff moves. The only caveat to that is that because it's different than vacant properties. So we also do a vacant property annual weed abatement program that we partner with LA County Department of Agriculture on. That program sends a letter out every year. We have a list of the vacant properties. The list gets sent out every year. The people have a certain amount of time to comply and self abate their vacant properties. And if it's not done, then the county will come in and abate it, and then the charge for that goes on their tax bill. And so there's also an option in there too when they get the letter to go, hey, if you just want us to do it for you, sign here. It's going to cost this much. So it's a great program. We've been involved with that for a number of years, a partnership. It works very well. Except for we had one just happen recently on Hanscom where they split the property and one of the piece of properties fell off. We found it now, it's back on, so we're good with that. When a structure goes on the property, then Fourth Amendment comes into play. So all we can do an assessment from is from the street, unless we get permission to enter the property. We're more than happy to do that, but a lot of times what we get is, hey, my neighbors, it's way overgrown, can you go check them out? Whatever we can see from the street, then we can cite, and we will cite, and they'll write on a paper, put it on the door, it says, hey, you've been cited for defensible space, please clean it up. Our encouragement is always compliance. That's what we're looking to do, and we usually will come back and revisit, and then we'll put another compliance notice in again. We've never gotten to the point where we need to do any kind of punitive citations or fees or fines, and we're thankful for that. I think everybody recognizes, and that was one of the things that we got through our community meetings, was everybody knows, yeah, it's a hazard up here and we need to take care of it. So we, for the most part, for everybody that we've come into contact with, very concerned about the area, very much want to make sure that their properties are safe.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
These are great questions from my fellow commissioners, so I don't have much to add, but I do think I would agree that emphasizes the importance of the urban forestry management plan. So if there's ever, well, when we're developing that, how would the city engage with the fire department? If there's feedback or specific guidance?
Right. And so one of the things that, Mr. Vartanians and I have been working on, in conjunction, just that making sure that we're working together and working side by side with that. We have a small piece of this, right? People have been asking, hey, can I yank this tree out? Can I do this? Can I do that? Okay, well, there's nothing in the code. And we go by the fire code. That we make it easy. It's like, this is what the code says. It's what fire. There's nothing in the fire code that says yank a tree out. It says that your tree or your limbs can't be within 10 feet of a roof, or chimney, or those things, or 10 feet of a chimney, not touching the roof. Anything relates to fire hazard. So it's very narrowly focused in that. But as we found out, we want to make sure that, are there places where we can kind of do this, walk this path side by side within urban forestry management, within fire protection? We don't want to solve one problem and create 5 others. And so that's something that we've committed to do and will continue to do. And encourage, like, we'll bring out and want the input. I'm a firefighter. I'm not an urban forestry planner and a manager. I'm not going to pretend to be. But I do know that, if it doesn't burn, it's going to, or if it does burn, that's not good for it. So, we're kind of trying to work from that same angle.
Right. And I guess on the forestry management side of it, we'd want to, I guess, keep in mind that there's some compensation, right? We need to make sure that we're preparing for removals.
Yeah.
And if we have a goal for canopy coverage or whatever it might be, we want to be aggressive on the other side of things, on the city's side of things, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Maybe just an obvious thing to say. And that might make adoption, or acceptance of the removals more, agreeable for people as well, if they know that there's a good plan in place.
Sure. And one of the reasons that we wanted to put this before this vegetation management standard is so that if somebody does come and say, well, I want to take the tree out because it's, I'm worried about fire. Okay. Let's go to the standard. Let's see what is within the defensible space. Is it within this, the zones? So we have something objective that we're not just, it's just, well, they're using fire or the threat of fire as an excuse to pull a tree, and so that's what, when it comes down to, because there are places within the ordinance that say, with the fire chief's discretion. Well, that's great, except for I want to make sure that my discretion is based on something empirical. So.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think that's all the comments we had. Okay, so there's a fire somewhere. Are you needed somewhere? No.
They are very, very capable of handling it. Unless you I thought if you have any
No,
other
I'm
questions for
sorry.
me?
Just
Great.
making a little light of that. Sorry. Let's move on to action item number 3, which is the tree ordinance supplemental FAQ. And Danielle, would you like to lead us through that?
Good evening, Commissioners, and thank you again for your time. So myself, as well as Michael Vartanians, are back at NRC again with our our amended tree ordinance FAQ. So since we've been to NREC, the last time I believe was in July, since then we've taken our staff recommendations to City Council. They went ahead and approved those recommendations to start amending the tree ordinance, to which we have provided them with the first reading. In advance of our second reading that we'll be taking to City Council next week on October 1st. We also wanted to pair with it frequently asked questions that might arise as residents are starting to digest and work their way through this amended ordinance. And to do that, we'd also like to pass it by this commission. So as you'll see on screen, or actually, apologies, I will take a step back and just as a brief reminder of what our recommendations aim to do was to not only protect and enhance South Pasadena's urban forest, but as well require trimming and removal permits for a mature protected trees only species. That specific list of trees has been pulled from the previous resolution 7360. Additionally, our recommendations aim to streamline the permitting process for residents, as this commission has seen a number of tree hearings and applications that you had to decipher against the current or the previous tree removal criteria. Additionally, align with the regional best practices as well as state requirements, address homeowner insurance and indefensible space concerns, as well as supporting our community trust and environmental stewardship. So with that in mind, we took those edits to our amended our tree ordinance and have now provided you here with an FAQ that is reflected of that. And so we will take a pause here to either receive any feedback from this commission and take any questions you might have.
Okay, any questions?
I have a quick one about the process of the tree ordinance amendment in general. So you said we've had the first reading, and then the next reading is going to be next week. I guess we've heard comments about other things that could be changed in the ordinance or could be amended. Is this the time, or is it pretty much all set in stone? It's up to the city council, I guess. Yeah.
A majority of the decision is with city council. However, we do encourage comments that can be taken back to our management as well as city council as to decipher sort of the final legs of this amended tree ordinance. However, I also invite Michael to provide some additional comments.
No, that was a great answer, Danielle. I just got up here in case there was other questions, but if there's any other feedback that you'd like staff and the council to consider, we're more than willing to listen, and we can take that information back to city manager and council. But like Danielle said, on October 1st is the second hearing, which if the ordinance update is approved that evening, then the ordinance goes into effect November 1st,
Okay.
1 month after.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of comments on the ordinance in general, but I think in terms of the FAQ, I'll sort of keep it focused on that first. I think it's really great. I like the addition of the historical trees because I think they're really fun. I think it provides a really good walkthrough of sort of what we're shooting for. Is this the entire FAQ?
It is not.
I didn't
I
think
can
so.
go to the next slide. So I guess I can provide a little bit more guidance to this FAQ. Our first set of questions are just general information. We start off with listing not only the trees, but defining what a mature protected tree is. Then shifting into care of those trees, so who's responsible for maintenance on private property, public property. Next set of questions is referring to our tree trimming. I will go to the next question if this would work. There we go. And then our next set of questions is regarding tree trimming. So we walk through specific rules pertaining to when a permit is needed. Additionally, we have codified actual trimming for oak trees, protected oak trees, the time within that they can receive permits to be able to trim. Additionally, highlighted who we prefer to have working on our trees and having that certified arborist license to be able to do that work on trimming, as well as outlining the process to apply for the permit, and then additionally how it is reviewed by city staff. Next, we provide you a similar FAQ for tree removal. First, kicking it off with when a removal is required. Additionally, highlighting the two different paths, one where tree removal applications are for not associated with development, as well as those that are associated with development, and then shifting into the criterion which they are reviewed against. Here, the first set of questions, number question 11, is addressing the not associated with development, and number 12 outlines the separate criteria for reviewing applications that are associated with removals associated with development. Apologies. Additionally, we again outline how these permits are reviewed. The main difference between the two is that removals that go through the process and they are associated with development do get reviewed by the Planning Review Authority, as well as a separate list of criteria. Additionally, I want to call out the public notification areas that we highlight here as well. And shifting to the last two pages, falling out of the, or before we move away from the removal questions, we also have reference to the replacement tree requirements. And additionally, any requirements regarding the actual replacement trees being planted, and the protections we have in place for that, and making sure that trees get to their establishment period. And then we shift into our emergency situations when and if a tree does pose a danger, an immediate danger, when a permit is required, when a permit might not be required. And additionally, shifting into our violations and penalties, defining what an unintentional violation is versus an intentional violation. And then we also close out with just some resources that residents can look to if they go through this FAQ, go through the tree ordinance, and they still have some questions. They're more than welcome to reach out to our Public Works team to have a brainstorm. Additionally, for any residents who are having a hard time viewing this, this is on our website, the National Resources Environmental Commission, underneath today's package, agenda package.
Thank you, Danielle. Are you guys entertaining questions now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Do you think we could go back to the very first FAQ?
Yes, I'm gonna go to the.
Yeah, no sweat. Kind of pertains to the gentleman's public comment at the beginning. Does the city maintain a list of the number of protected trees within city limits? Do we have that information somewhere?
For our public right-of-way, we have a list of all the city trees that are within the public right-of-way. I would need to double check if we have that data for protected trees on private property.
Okay. It may just serve a purpose just to highlight how accurate the gentleman's statement is. If there is, if the protected trees are the minority throughout the city, what is the actual number? So we could have an idea of, whether the city is protecting the trees that need to be protected.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that that'll be part of the urban forest management plan that we prepare a study of what the number of species of trees are that we have in the city, what those species are, and with that, if we're recommended that you have a lot of this specific species that's very unique to the city and gives a character, or it should be something that the city is protecting, then this list can be amended by resolution at any time.
Perfect.
Right.
Thank you.
Do you anticipate that there's going to be quite a few tree permit requests over the next 3 years because of the timeline and particularly regarding the Monterey Hills area? I'm just asking that, and you might not have an answer, sort of posing that because I wonder if there's just going to be a big backlog with requests, and that might inhibit or just cause a lot of ambiguity. Because within a lot of these situations, it's up to different people's discretion. So how do you, have super accurate discretion when you have such a backlog of permits that you have to approve or deny within a 3-year period?
Sure. I mean, if we see that we're receiving higher than normal tree removal permit or tree trimming permit applications, we can always, increase the staffing we have either internally or with an additional city arborist or, arborists that are offered to us through West Coast Arborist to manage that demand if we come across that. For now, we're able to manage it between West Coast Arborist and city staff to review these permits. Our goal is that by creating these objective criteria, it's clear that when a city arborist recommends approval or denial and the director makes a decision, it's not really, it's clear as to why, and an applicant can know why a permit was denied or why it was approved, and it's not really a subjective decision. So that's our goal.
And just to follow up on a slightly different note, in terms of like creating like those more objective decisions, I know there's a definition of what a tree is in the ordinance, and I was wondering if the vegetation management standards would rely on that definition, particularly because I was wondering what the distinction between a shrub and a tree is. Is a shrub something that is not a tree, and a tree is just what is in the ordinance? I know that that's particularly granular, but I think that there might be a gray area when it comes to removal for the homeowner specifically.
Sure, I understand. Let me double check the exact definition. I know it's a woody perennial with a mature height of greater than 16. So with our proposed ordinance, the definition of tree means a woody perennial usually having one or several main stems and a mature height greater than 16 feet. And if I'm not mistaken, the definition of shrub was removed because really this ordinance was meant for trees. And we can document that as well in our administrative policies and regulations that we're putting together, what, how staff will evaluate what is a shrub and what is a tree, just so that's an additional layer of objectivity when we go through these permits.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, it's fair. The tree ordinance is just to the trees. But maybe you can't answer this question. Maybe I should have asked this to the chief, but how do these two, how does the standard and how does the tree ordinance like interact with each other? I know it's said in the presentation that the management standards sort of rely on the tree ordinance, but in the case of those items where things might be not explicitly defined, I was wondering what it would rely on. Hopefully that's my question is clear.
I think it's the vegetation management standard and those pieces that we look at, we don't, there's not, with the exception of like the zero zone or things like that, the removal of things is not as much of the focus as the trimming, the clean, it's the lean, the green, and, clean. So a lot of the fire hazard deals with dead vegetation, deals with overgrown or not properly managed or cared for. And so there's not a lot of information from the fire perspective on the removal of that, with the exception within that zero zone, within that saying that there's basically nothing there. And so, but what there's no problem for us to make sure we're sharing definitions in that, and that's part of that walking step by step, so that if we're defining a shrub, it's the same, that we're all speaking the same language, because in order for us to work, vocabulary is going to be that first piece of that. So hopefully that answers what you're looking for.
Yeah, that answers the question, and I think that maybe one small item, and I'm not sure how where this addition would be made would be like including the definition of a shrub and also I know you guys do have like a explicit definition of trimming, but I know that there are different types of trimming for different like trees and shrubs, and you don't have to include all of them, but I'm just wondering if those distinctions are also important.
I think we can add some information to our frequently asked questions about, how you make a distinction between a tree and a shrub. That's an excellent point. Really, our focus was, if someone needs to trim what is a protected mature tree, and the reason for the trimming is because the branches are touching the roof or it's, within a certain proximity of a structure, our current or our new ordinance can address that with one of the criteria. That was the intention behind with that, but obviously the fire department and public works are going to work together to make sure that their vegetation management plan, our administrative regulations, frequently asked questions all align with one another. So we're giving the community as clear of direction as we can.
Yeah, and I think it definitely achieves what it's set out to. And I also like how it's defensive regarding the development aspect because, a lot of that's going to be taking place in the next few years. Now, I don't think most of that's going to be in that fire zone specifically, but I like that it's sending a very clear statement that these trees are protected and that there'll really be a roadblock if you don't heed this small request.
Thank you.
So one thing that I'm curious about in the FAQ, or I guess in the ordinance in general, is that when you look at the criteria for approving either a trimming or removal application, there's a lot of overlap. So if you can imagine a tree that has a couple trunks and one trunk is offending and is terrible, you could, I think, submit an application to either remove the entire tree or trim it. And so in those situations, how do we decide? Do we just accept whatever someone says, or do we try to prefer a less destructive option if only one trunk or one set of branches is actually impeding something? Or how do we deal with sort of those edge cases?
Yeah, so all applications are reviewed by our city certified arborist. So she sees an application, goes to the site, examines the tree, and for your example, if that limb looks like that doesn't need a full removal but can do some heavy trimming, or is in need of some heavy trimming, she'll provide that recommendation to the director, and the director will then either deny or approve based on that recommendation, and can also provide them basis to shift.
Okay.
So obviously it'll be a different price, but we do have our certified arborist looking at all of these applications and verifying, not just to, verify whether or not the resident is good to move forward with removing it, but whether it's in the good of the health of the tree.
Okay. And then for the table one with I know we talk about them as protected trees in the scope of the tree ordinance, but in the scope of, I think, the resolution that was passed, they're called native trees. And so if we ever did want to amend this list to include more trees or include any gymnosperm in the list, how would we ever reconcile those two categories? Because if I said, for instance, I wanted to protect a eucalyptus tree, don't, but if I did, I couldn't include that in the resolution, or how would I sort of get around that to include a tree that's maybe water wise and like fire safe and whatever, but is not native given the language of these two ordinances?
Yeah, that's a great call out. And that resolution actually does have a list. The second list on there is of drought tolerant trees that aren't considered native. But like as Michael mentioned, if this list needs to be expanded, this is a great commission to be able to have a conversation about that and then bring it back to your city council to try and get it shifted and approved to be whatever trees you'd like to be included there. And then also encourage community engagement. So if you have a lot of residents coming individually outside of these commissions or coming to you during a commission meeting, they'd like to have some list of trees. We can also dedicate time to reevaluating that resolution and seeing which ways we can shift it.
So, but in the resolution, I guess, so there's native trees and there's the second category. Is everything listed in that resolution considered a protected tree, or is it just the native trees from that resolution?
Right now, it's just the native trees.
Okay.
So if I may add, sorry.
Yeah.
So the resolution defines trees that are native that the city has adopted as native.
Mhm.
And then the ordinance says that protected trees are those that the city has defined as native. So to add a species of tree to the protected list would be to pass a resolution creating a new list, whether that's adding a tree or removing a tree or anything in between.
But that would be a change to the tree ordinance or a change
the
or an amendment to the
resolution.
resolution?
The resolution will update the tree ordinance. So if, over time, the city would like to add a handful of species or whatever it is, then they get added to the protected tree species list because that becomes the latest resolution establishing what the city has adopted as native.
I guess I'm confused about that because we keep on talking about native in this, and we've just said that it's only the native trees that are protected. So we would have to pass a resolution to say that a non-native tree is native? I feel like I'm misunderstanding that. Like, to include more trees, they could only be native trees, but we could say that more native trees are protected by amending the resolution. But if we ever wanted to protect a tree that weren't native, how would we go about doing that?
So it's protected trees are trees that are native to, that the city has designated as native to Southern California and has listed as such by resolution by the city council.
Right.
So if there's a tree that's native to Southern California but isn't part of that list, the city can always add that species to the list that they would like to designate as native per that resolution for the city of South Pasadena.
Maybe just to clarify, what is that list called? How do we refer to that list?
I'm sorry?
How do we refer to that list if it's
Yeah.
it's native plus the city's favored trees? Is there a specific name for that list that we could use maybe? And
It's just, it's the list of trees that the city has found to be native per resolution.
That's a mouthful.
Protected tree list, potentially.
Yeah,
Right, but
maybe we
Protected
should-
tree
we
list,
should
like
start using
protected
language.
species list.
Yeah.
But the protected tree list is based on this resolution, and this resolution includes native trees and non-native trees. But again, as I understand it, the tree ordinance carves out some of those trees in the resolution to be protected trees and leaves other trees that are listed in that resolution as good generally, but are not native, to no longer be protected, right?
Correct.
Okay. So then I think that creates this tension where if we ever wanted to protect a tree species, we would first have to lie and say that it's native
No.
or
it would
completely
be-
change the tree ordinance.
I think we're saying it would be on the protected tree list, which
Mm.
includes natives plus things that we designate.
That's not my understanding.
From what I understand, it's on the resolution, the native trees that are on that resolution. If you want to add to that list,
But
that's something that explored that second list. And I apologies, I might have misspoken. That's not to be included in this current path that the amendment's going on, or the tree ordinance is going down. So right now, we're just focusing on natives. So if you want to include more natives, you update that resolution, we add them to that list, the protected species list, and then we move forward with just natives. So we're not looking at non-natives right now, or even if they're considered drought tolerant.
Okay, so if we did want to protect these non-native trees, we would need to change this amendment to the tree ordinance.
So how we have it is you would update the resolution, because changing an ordinance takes much more time.
Right.
So resolution's a little bit easier to update and keep updated and sort of live more, for lack of a better term, a living document. While the ordinance is a little bit more set in law, so it's not as flexible. If that makes sense.
Right, but I mean, I'm sorry for belaboring this point,
Oh,
but
no, that's okay.
but I think that we're focusing very narrowly in the ordinance
Mhm.
on native trees. And we're referencing a list that includes native trees plus some other stuff,
Yes.
but the other stuff is not protected. And so if we amended that resolution to say we also like these 6 other trees, we could only do that and protect them via the tree ordinance if they were native. Like if we add the other drought tolerant, if we expand the drought tolerant list,
Mhm.
that has no effect on the tree ordinance, and those trees would remain unprotected even if we add them to this resolution as a great drought tolerant species. It would still not be protected along with the other drought tolerant species that are also not protected.
So yes, so
Yeah.
for a tree to be considered a protected tree species, it would have to be designated as a native per resolution by the city council. Currently, that's section 2 of the resolution. So if the city finds that more trees are designated to be native, then that updates that list, includes those species, those trees now become protected trees
So then,
per the
right,
ordinance.
so right now, the only path we have forward, if we want to protect a non-native tree, is to amend the tree ordinance,
No, the resolution.
a non-native tree.
If the city finds that that tree is native to Southern California and to the city of South Pasadena, then it gets added to the list of native species per South Pasadena's resolution.
Yeah, I understand that.
Right.
Like if we're talking about a native tree, it's very clear to me.
Yeah.
But if we ever want to protect a non-native tree, that would require the tree ordinance be changed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. For
I'll
non-native.
double check with the city attorney. I don't think that was our intention. Our intention was that if city council would like to add a tree to the protected tree species list, they can do that by resolution.
And I agree that
Yeah.
they could add things to that resolution, but there's 2 lists in there, and one of them is just like, one of them is a native list that we care about for the tree ordinance, but the other one is just a list of trees we think are drought tolerant. And that is kind of the end of that designation. It's just we think they're drought tolerant,
Correct.
and that's the end of them. They're not protected.
Correct.
So then only native trees are protected.
Right. The list of trees that the city has designated to be native per that resolution are the trees that are going to be considered protected with this ordinance.
Okay. Okay. I think I understand.
Great questions.
So then I think in that case, this FAQ is technically correct in terms of what is a protected tree, that it's a native tree species listed. I think that might raise some further questions when you think about like a southern live oak that's called Quercus virginiana. Looking at the name, I would not think it's native to this part of the southern United States, but I don't know. I would guess it's native to the deep south. And so I think that it's going to, by having a list of trees that the city council has just decided are native, I think that opens us up to a lot of really difficult and indefensible situations where we can prove other ways that a tree is clearly not native to South Pasadena, but we've called it native. Or alternatively, that a tree is very clearly native to South Pasadena and we have it included in our list, or to become naturalized to a point that it probably deserves protection, but biologically speaking, didn't evolve here.
Yes, and I think we're prioritizing California natives, so not just natives specific to South Pasadena, but California natives. But I understand your point. Yes, yes, and I think we'll definitely take these comments back to our city attorney and just make sure that we're not closing off loops in the future. You know, like we mentioned, we are trying to work with community members. We're trying to work with our commission, our council members to make sure that all opinions are being covered. And of course, we're not going to make everyone happy, but we are doing our best to try and at least streamline this process for residents who are using this, who are abiding by, you know, this ordinance previously and now moving forward, and making it as easy as possible for them.
Yeah, and I think that the changes that have been a huge streamlining to this. And I do think that it's made the ordinance a lot more clear to follow. I worry that it's left out a lot of things, but I think that the work that you've done on this ordinance is great.
And the things that are left out, you know, we do have a lot of conversations about them, and we do feel the urban management plan, once we get that up and rolling, will supplement a lot of what is this ordinance might feel is leaning one way or the other. And, you know, really building out that sustainable, not just looking at tomorrow, not looking at a year from now, but what is 10 years? What does our urban canopy look like? And really having goals that the city and city staff can work against, and making sure that we're supplementing whatever trees might be potentially lost.
While we're on the topic briefly, has the urban forestry management plan been started, or is it in a sort of pre-planning phase where like nothing, no pen to paper's really been put down yet?
It's-
Yeah, at
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
pre-planning phase, we know that there's some grant opportunities that we can look forward to in the summer. Right now, we're looking to see if we want to move forward, you know, right away, or if we have, you know, until we get some proposals, see how much that costs, and then we can get ready to apply for that grant.
That's all I've got, just a little bit.
Thank you.
I just had one small comment. FAQ might be, you know, where 95% of people go if they ever want to do anything with a tree. So it's good to have it, you know, clear. And it's also a good place where you might think people are, you'd like to develop some trust from the community that things are going to go well if they enter into the process. So I guess I don't know if you can do this, but is there like a timelines you can estimate for trimming in particular? As you know, trimming is discussed pretty briefly, but it's a very light thing, and you can imagine someone might schedule at the last minute, you know, maybe say like, oh, I should probably make this in compliance. Maybe I'll push it off a week, you know.
Yeah.
Could they have some validation that there's like a limited timescale for review or?
Yeah, we do have timescales based off of our old tree ordinance, but in our building out of the administrative policies, we can work in some timelines that we can also then share with this FAQ once we have it a little bit more fleshed out, what that turnaround time period will look like. But we're hoping it's more expedited than the current version. But yes, that's a great inclusion to have on this FAQ, just some timelines when people can anticipate how long it might take for their application.
And for removals, I'm guessing it's a lot harder to define how long it will take, but like, if you could put estimates for the fastest and, you know, review time, that might be helpful for people to know what they're getting into.
Yeah, we can definitely put
Definitely,
a timeline for, you know, as far as city processes.
Mhm.
After that, you know, if there's an appeal or the application gets denied, how long that takes. We've kind of summarized that in the ordinance as far as, you know, if we have to bring something to NREC, we'll do that within 60 days and whatnot. Council, if NREC gets appealed, denies it and gets appealed, that goes to council at the next city council meeting. So we've summarized that in the ordinance, but we can definitely add some language in the FAQ.
Okay.
'Cause, yeah, we anticipate most people will pick this up to read how to navigate the new ordinance.
Right, yeah, good. Okay, thank you. Any other questions, clarifications? If not, we'll open up for public comment on this.
Thank you. We do have two public comments in person. First is Angelo Gladding.
Hi, Commission. I came with 3 things to say, and now I have 12. Um, Protections, I'm glad we're talking about non-natives. I don't know who got the conversation started about removing non-native protections. All the other cities around us are adding protections, particularly in the non-native area. Adding protections, or like Arcadia just did, having a unprotected list, which is easier, really. There's like 10 species and they're all the bad ones that we know about, and we can target removal of those. Italian cypress, fan palms, eucalyptus, usual culprits. Um, Replacement numbers and on-site. The replacement numbers went way down, and the language that was ambiguous in the old code, which led to no on-site replacements, it has now been made concrete. So let's compare to Pasadena. Here, under this new regime, oak, 50, 60-year-old oak, 20 inches, here it receives 1 replacement and it's optional if it's on site. Correct me if I'm wrong. Pasadena is 8 replacements, 4 need to be on site. So here it's 1 and it's optional. Pasadena, it's 4, or it's 8 and 4 need to be on site. It's a massive difference. Claremont, we were compared to Claremont. Staff compared us to, started off with San Marino and a couple of other cities on the list, and San Marino quickly disappeared, and the end result was we were just being compared to Claremont, which doesn't have a private property protection plan in place. So yeah, if you compare yourself to the absolute non-existent bare bottom, then I guess we're doing good. This work predates the windstorm and the fires. So choosing, all of these decisions aren't entirely based upon the events that happened. There's a lot of development going on in the hills. All the development is going on in the hills, and they're all treeless. And Michael just told me that the one that went through planning that's across the street, it might not be required to have any trees planted. There's a tree of heaven out front, and that might be the one that's our new specimen tree. There's just so many things wrong with this.
Okay, thank you. Next comment.
Thank you. Will Wendy Ryan please join us at the podium?
Hi, I first want to apologize to the chief for walking up. A lot of my neighbors, we were trying to watch this on Zoom and couldn't figure out the hand thing. And then everybody said, go down there, go down there. So I have some comments. A quick one about your comment. And I had written to the city council, but I didn't hear from most of them. Just have a mature tree, a definition of a mature tree. You can have it be 18-inch diameter trunk, 24-inch, whatever you guys decide on that. Mature trees need to be protected as well as natives because they're mature for a reason. They've been there a long time. Now, I want to get to my second point, which is public safety, which involves all of us. I heard from some people who observed the city contractors removing the roots to fix the sidewalks. So if you read the ANSI A300 chapters 8 and 9, there's a specific way to do that. You do not remove the roots unless you're removing the tree the same day. It's a huge safety hazard. You're taking away the anchor of that tree. And if they apparently the guys that are the contractors, even if they're hired by the city, their boss is the city. The boss is saying, you got to fix this sidewalk. And they are not following ANSI the standards, ISA and all those standards. And doing it in a hurry, and this is why I'm fearful of the exempting the city contractor from everything. They can't be exempt from everything. So, no, ANSI was like, what? Prohibit hazardous root cutting. Add an ordinance language prohibiting the cutting and grinding of major roots greater than 2 inches in diameter of the roots on trees unless the tree is removed that day. It makes sense. You've got a tree that's like a toothpick standing there ready. Could fall anytime. It's a safety issue. Okay, so we have a city arborist. None of us know who it is, but they can't be everywhere all the time. So there are reasons, there are some ordinances. I know they're trying to fix it, and they've done a good job on some things, but we need you to really oversee. I thought I made good comments, and I didn't hear from, I heard from very few of the city council, and the lawyer that was, there was a talk about administrative guidance. Administrative guidance, the guy that's out, that's gonna cut the tree, that's being told to do the sidewalk first, he doesn't know about administrative guidance. He's just doing what he's told. The city has to have some safe ordinances to protect the safety of the public. And that's my comment.
Thank you very
basically.
much.
So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for your
And
comment.
again, sorry, I interrupted. We were so far, when they said the comments were closed after 6 minutes, 6 minutes after, we were all worried that nobody would get to say anything. And so thank you. Anyway, thanks for listening.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, any comments on Zoom?
Thank you, Commissioner. If you would like to make a comment on Zoom, please raise your hand at this time. Thank you, participants on Zoom. That now concludes our public comment period.
Well, we're being asked, this is an action item, so we're being asked to approve the FAQ with the comments we've provided.
Correct.
And would anyone like to make a motion in that regard, or is there further discussion or questions or more recommendations you'd like to make first?
Sorry, can we just go through all of the recommendations that we're making for the FAQs, just so we're all on the same page?
Yeah, let's see. How do we like to summarize that for a motion?
So I have a few notes here. I have including mention of number and total of trees as well as their species in the urban management plan, vegetation management standards, making sure that definitions of trees and shrubs are defined not only in the FAQ, but also in the vegetation standards as well as the tree ordinance, including a timeline of tree removal and trimming applications, as well as clarifying native tree inclusions within the ordinance and expanding that list beyond drought tolerant. So
I have one small nitpicky one, but if we have to approve it, I was just going to email you, but in the list of tree species, the proper formatting would be to italicize them and only capitalize the first word. The specific epithet would be lowercase. So like Quercus would be capitalized, but Virginiana would not. Other than that, no.
thank you.
Okay, if that list of comments on the FAQ is acceptable to everyone, I would welcome a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
And a second.
Thank you, Commissioners. I will now call for a motion to approve the drafted tree ordinance supplemental FAQ.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
I don't know if it was seconded, actually.
I second.
I was
that.
asking for a second.
Oh, there.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Apologies. I will now commence the vote for approval of the drafted tree ordinance supplemental FAQ. Commissioner DeVille Bork,
Yes.
Commissioner Law,
Yes.
Commissioner Noe,
Yes.
Commissioner Oyevsky,
Yes.
and Commissioner Yee.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion is approved.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item 4, which is the approval of the minutes from the July 22nd meeting. And those are included in the attached agenda. Give people a moment to review that.
I do want to note we do have a public comment for this item as well.
Okay, let's hear the public comment.
Thank you. Angelo Gladding, will you please join us at the podium?
Yeah. The last meeting, I made a general public comment about the prior meeting being a special uncalendared meeting where this whole ordinance was approved for the second reading. So it came here once, and then it went to public safety, public works, and then it came back. It wasn't available for public comment at public safety. So I assumed that it wouldn't be available for public comment at Public Works, so I wasn't able to give a public comment there. This process needs to be done right, and I think we're realizing late into the game, while the insurance letters are piling up, that there's some fundamental mistakes here. So the minutes didn't account for all of that. They were a little too generic. So I'd like you to add that I pointed out that the special meeting was uncalendared and prevented transparency and accountability in this process. And also, I believe I mentioned that public safety and public works commissions gave great comments that almost were entirely ignored. Like everything they said was good stuff about the way our current code works. And I've spoken to the author, one of the authors of the current code, and there's a lot of good ideas behind it. It was broken at a certain point by staff. Staff stopped implementing things this way and that way. But I think if you start thinking about non-natives, you're going to find yourself in a dizzying spiral until you come full circle back to what our code currently is, where it's all non-natives are protected and you kind of have an upgrade path. And that upgrade path would be for eucalyptus and Italian cypress. And we already have that.
Well, just to keep it on topic of your question about, your
So
comment about.
Two things. The fact that there was an uncalendared event and that Public Works and Public Safety were ignored. The comments that they made were ignored.
Okay, I'm looking, so thank you for your comment. So I was not present at this meeting, but I'm just reading the summary of the comment from July, and it does refer to, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, I heard you. It does refer to some detail about the comments made about the ordinance, but if it's possible to add a comment about the process being unclear, I think that would be a reasonable summary of a change. If anyone objects to that, I was not present at this meeting, so I can't really say, but if you object, please feel free to do so now. I think that seems like a fair amendment.
Staff is happy to amend.
I have a point of information. Do we then have to table this approval of the minutes until next meeting and then not vote on it?
No, you can approve them with the condition of amending it, and then staff will amend it, put it through, route it for approvals through today's chair, which is Commissioner Law, and then it will get re-uploaded to the website.
Okay, well, I would welcome a motion to approve with that amendment.
I would like to move to approve with the amendment.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners. I will now call for a motion to approve the July 22nd, 2025 NREC regular meeting minutes with the amendment that was discussed. Commissioner DeVille-Bork,
Yes.
Commissioner Law,
Yes.
Commissioner Noe,
Yes.
Commissioner Oyevsky,
Yes.
and Commissioner Yee.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Motion passes.
Okay, let's move on to item 5, the City Council Liaison Communications. Councilmember Cacciati is here in the audience.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a handout, and I'll. If you're getting the handout, just want to let you know the gold line, the A line, which I am your representative on the Construction Authority, opened up for revenue passenger services Friday to the 4 additional stations, 9.1 mile extension from Glendora, San Dimas, downtown Laverne, right by the university, to northern part of Pomona, contiguous and co-contemporary with the Metrolink station here to take you all the way into San Bernardino. Great opening ceremonies, exciting, great, 4 beautiful stations I recommend you visit when you have time. Only tough thing was we're working for the last year on designing, planning the next phase to get to Claremont and into Montclair, as I mentioned before. But bad news is the bid came in about $500 million over. And the other issue is we've been really trying to work with San Bernardino County SBCTA Transportation Authority, and they just have a different idea than us. We've been working with them to try to get it there. They were going to put $30–40 million to get it from Claremont into the San Bernardino into Montclair, which is a great transit station. They're doing a lot of transit-oriented development there. But they just had a vote, and it was close. I think it's 15-11 or something, but they voted not to support it getting to Montclair. So they have other ideas. So we're trying to work with some of the people who voted against it, get some more people elected who will vote for it. We ultimately want to get it to Ontario Airport if we could. They have other ideas. They want to increase Metrolink service. So we'll see. We're working together with them to try to make it happen. This is the Invest Clean program where we at AQMD, working with our cities in the San Gabriel Valley, all 4 counties. We won the largest EPA grant, $490 million. But this is $417 million available. If you look at the top left, it says Charging Infrastructure Program. These are for the big heavy-duty trucks, hydrogen fuel cell, electric, battery electric, and charging stations. Usually along the corridors for logistics, supply chain, goods movement corridor along the 60 to 10, et cetera. Top right, truck replacement program, diesel class 8 goods movement. Tells you the requirements there. At bottom left, this is great stuff. Battery electric cargo handling equipment. That's at the ports. Takes all the containers off the ships or puts them on trains, things like that. So if you know companies, most of these are available through November, except the last one. And this is the battery electric switcher program. That's those trains that usually work in a large yard and move goods around in the yard. There's a couple of those we have in our 4-county region. So great stuff. We can change a lot. The largest source of pollution is basically the ports, all the ships coming in. So good news here. And we just passed about a few weeks ago, became effective, the Zero Emission Go Zero program. That provides up to, it's not on here, I only have one of these, but it provides $3,000 for people in our basin to change from your polluting natural gas, water, and space heaters, which produce huge amounts of NOx, which is, poisonous in your homes, to a heat pump or water heater type of system. And probably 2/3, at least the money up to 3/4, we want to go to people income and disadvantaged communities, but the rest of us can still apply for it. So change over to a clean powered heat pump. And right now we're negotiating with the ports of Long Beach and the ports of Los Angeles on a memorandum of understanding. We're going to start a rulemaking process to impose rules on the ports to clean up your act. They've been doing some good things over the last 25 years, but most of it was done 15 years ago and not much lately with all the container traffic coming in and the trucks and the trains. It's just, and the poor people live down there by the ports and also oil refineries. It's difficult. So last minute, we gave the ports and our staff 7 weeks to come to an agreement. We believe we did it last Friday. It'll come back to the main board in next week. And we'll basically say, let's sit down. We've got an infrastructure plan to put an electric, hydrogen fuel cell, power battery up, different fuel for your not just diesel, but methanol, things like that. And also enforcement mechanisms. If you don't do it, there's going to be enforcement issues. So kind of an overall plan. We were hammered by a lot of environmental groups, some of whom I belong to, for not doing a rule. But a lot of things in this measure, whatever you call it, an MOU or rule, are stronger than what we were going to put on our original rule. So I think the ports of Long Beach, the ports of LA, their mayors, the unions down there, the environmental groups, we've got to come to some agreement. Otherwise, there's just be litigation for all these next years. We're going to be the brunt of all the pollution. Because those trucks, even though they're down there, you've got Trader Joe's, Pavilions, Bristol Farms. Watch during the day how many 18-wheeler diesel trucks pull in and drop off the vegetables, the fruits, the canned goods we eat. Dozens of trucks. And they sit there idling, back up idling, and they're called TRUs, Transportation Refrigeration Units. They even pollute more than the trucks because that unit on there that's keeping it cold, that sends out pollution. So it impacts all of us. And those trucks going up and down Fair Oaks by the freeways and stuff, all that pollution just stays in our basin. So we're working on that. Yeah, happy to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and we'll now move to Commissioner Communications. We'll start on this side.
Nothing at this time.
I know we all probably want to go home now, but I want to take just a couple minutes to say something that I went to like the catacombs of the library to learn about, and it's about the history of South Pasadena as it pertains to environmentalism. So I think that South Pasadena now sees itself as like a very pro-environmental, progressive city. But I think that they kind of, it almost incorrectly like sees itself as always being that way. I don't like see any good reason that our historical protection of trees has always been like because of environmentalism. Rather, it's actually been because of heritage and tradition. That's why people wanted to protect these trees. So when you look at these like more archaic classifications, I think that there's a reason for that. Like, why do we protect these trees that aren't native? Well, it's because, you know, we made these like arbitrary classifications because we thought they looked nice in the community. That's where like a lot of this, like a lot of this originates. And fortunately, it's become more of an environmental thing, which is great. But I know that that's like a super like meta comment. Like, what can you really do with that? And I think what it means is when we start looking at like refining these laws and making these definitions, we just have to like be comfortable with like kind of writing them again from scratch. And I don't think that it's really anyone's fault. It's just like you're dealing with this like difficult framework. How are you supposed to know like what the correct way to handle this is? You think you should rely on like your predecessors, but I think that that's probably not the best thing to do. And honestly, it's a really complicated process. I don't know how many protected trees, native trees there are in the Monterey Hills area. I can't go do that on my own, right? I can't look at every development that doesn't have a tree. But that's because, you know, that shouldn't have to be done. And I think that because I don't know these things, that isn't like necessarily my problem, but that is just like a problem that I like need to represent because I recognize that that's an issue. And I think that like residents should come more with public comments and talk about like these specific areas and houses that don't have these trees. Like Angelo Gladding, you were talking about how that one house in the hills just had like one tree in the front. I think it's important to just like bring that like evidence super often because, you know, I don't even think people do these things maliciously. It's just like you don't know necessarily what's going on, and then this thing gets built, and it's just sort of a systemic issue, right? And I don't want to rely on like the individuals to like know everything because it's just like I'm not powerful enough to do all of those things, and I wish I was, but I can't. I can only like represent that. So that's just my speech. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to comment. I actually recently began service as a Clean Power Alliance commissioner through the Citizens Advisory Commission. So you might hear me making comments more on clean power and relaying that back to the community here. I'll be representing San Gabriel Valley, one of two commissioners for the valley. So it's broader than South Pasadena, but South Pasadena, I hope you all know, has a very proud role in the formation of the Clean Power Alliance. It really was a foundational member And it is the largest community choice aggregator in the country, which is a very cool program that really democratizes how people get their power. So, so I welcome comments and feedback. I'll make one comment here, which is that after attending my first commission meeting, they're opening a community benefits grant program. And so that's open for the next month or so. That's an opportunity for people to apply for community benefits of various kinds, but it's meant to be connected to the power generation sourcing of power that Clean Power Alliance is responsible for. So if you have questions on that, I can help you walk through that. And also they're interested in looking for community testimonials. So people in the community who are enthusiastic supporters of the Clean Power Alliance and the services they provide, and you know, the fact that we have 100% green power as a default, the quality of the power they provide, anything related to that is very welcome. I'm happy to walk you through that process of providing feedback and testimonials for the CPA. I will stop there. Thanks.
Nothing from me.
No new events for me, but I think based on the discussion that we've heard, I am very curious to talk more about an urban forestry management plan. I think that's something that we are beginning to find out we really, really do need before we start changing our fire severity hazard map, not necessarily before, as we change our fire severity hazard maps, as we think about changing our tree ordinance. I think it's becoming clear that there's a lot that we don't know and that we're making a lot of decisions very blind in terms of what their impact's going to be. So I do think that we need to think about that more seriously. And then that's all I've got. I think that we should also consider the, pending what staff says about the native versus protective trees, consider ways to flesh out that resolution a little bit more to protect more trees that might actually be important to the city that are not necessarily native or are.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll move on to staff liaison communications. Danielle.
Thank you, Commissioners. We do have a few communications from staff just regarding a couple upcoming events that we have. Starting this Friday, or continuing this Friday, we have our Athens office hours, where residents are invited to come and enjoy a about 10-minute demonstration on what goes where. And then we shift into somewhat of a DMV informal Q&A style, where residents are invited up to one of our Athens coordinators and representatives to answer any specific questions they might have about this three-stream transition. So our next office hours will be this Friday, September 26th from 12 to 2. And our last office hours will be next Tuesday in this council chambers from 6 to 8. Additionally, myself and Athens will be sitting at the upcoming farmers market for this Thursday as well as next Thursday. We'll be there from about 5 to 7 to answer similarly any questions that residents might have. Additionally, and most excitingly, we have a fall compost and mulch giveaway coming up this Saturday. We'll be down in the Arroyo Seco from 9 to 12 p.m. So if any residents are interested in getting some free nutrition and delicious compost and mulch, feel free to head on down. I'll be there with a big smile on my face. And thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. And I'll note upcoming events here. There are a few other items noted: household hazardous waste collection events, LA County Smart Gardening workshops and webinars, and the Metro Water District turf removal and native landscape webinars are ongoing. And there's URLs in the agenda packet if you'd like to find more information on those. So with no further items, I will adjourn this meeting at 8:05 p.m. Our next meeting will be November 25th at 6:30 p.m. Thank you.